Hello and welcome to the first Cross League podcast. With me for this one is Des Foy, and I'm Declan Foy, and let's get into it. So first of all, let's just talk about some Rugby League news. We're just at this point just after the grand finals and near the start of the World Cup. So St. Helens, Des, your thoughts?
Yeah, they were comfortable winners, I thought, but they've been comfortably leading the league all through the year. The only time they had any slip-ups, what did they slip up against Toulouse early this season? Don't know why they did that. I don't know what happened there, but the only other times they lost really was when they had people missing, I think. So I thought it was a bit disappointing, the grand final. To be honest, fair play to Leeds to have got there, but they got there from what was it, fifth or something. And really, at one stage, like towards mid-season, they looked like they might go down. They looked like they might get relegated. So for a team, fair play to them to have got to the final, but it was almost like, I thought it should have really been a Wigan. Wigan slipped up badly to not get to that final, but Salford were playing well quite late in the season, played some good stuff as well. But still, like St. Helens were sort of just head and shoulders above everybody, I thought. I watched some of the semi-final.
It looks like dominance from St. Helens then.
Yeah, but not that it's that great a football. In my opinion,
right?
It sort of shows the weakness of the league. I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I know yesterday there was they probably weren't taking it too seriously, and I suppose they'd be missing their best players. But New Zealand put 74 points on Leeds.
Yeah, I saw that. That's a bit of a statement, isn't it? 74 points against a fairly decent team, but you don't know, do you? I mean, it's the end of the season for a lot of them Leeds Rhinos, and like
the best players would be with the other squad, wouldn't they?
When the first few tries went in, I'm sure they thought, I can either go on holiday injured or I can enjoy myself.
Yeah.
Anyway, so just moving on to the Penrith Parramatta grand final. Sort of disappointing in the end. I think the grand final was very similar in that the one team dominated for like most of it, and then like it was almost they were never really going to come back. Parramatta were beaten in the sort of first half, really, maybe even earlier than that. But when you look at the scores, and particularly late on, and the ones that the chances that they missed, they probably could have come back to within a try had they not had the knock on over the line, and then was a kick through, was there as well? It's a couple of weeks ago, I can't remember, but it was closer. It ended up being closer than maybe it should have been, or it seemed on the night, I suppose.
Yeah, but I think what sort of struck me about Penrith all through the season, they're the same. They only really lost games, didn't they? The same as St. Helens. They only really lost games when they had players missing for Origin. That 2 seasons now they've done the same. Like hardly lost. But what I do like about them is they do play some good stuff. They mix it up, and they don't usually take their foot off the gas. Like when they sort of, they be 15 points in front with 10 minutes to go. They like in club games, in the normal rounds of the league, they were still scoring another 2 tries. Now I think if they'd been really pushed, if they really thought they were in, a chance of being in trouble, I think they'd have stepped up and probably scored again, against Parramatta, just to sort of kill them off completely later on.
Yeah. And then the other sort of news towards the end of the sort of club year Toulouse relegated.
Yeah, disappointing. I find that very disappointing. To me, they brought him into the competition. Like to me, you don't bring a club from another country into a competition and not make some allowances for it, not give them like 3 years grace that they won't be relegated, give them the same amount of money or even allow them extra, to be honest, in the salary cap and things like that. Because, it's just a disaster for them now. I mean, they used to play in a ordinary, not very good ground, and then they've then moved to where the rugby union club play. Now, what will they go back to playing in the championship or whatever it is, the second division, outside Super League, back at the old ground, not be able to attract the same sort of players because they're not sure to be going back up again, and I just think it's terrible for the club, and it just kills off the interest.
Yeah, I think like when you were playing, obviously Oldham went through a time of like yo-yo seasons.
Yeah,
there's slightly different economics.
Yes, they are. Yeah, we made more money in the second division than when we went up to the first division, players-wise. Because of back in those days, very much sort of based on win bonuses, and we even had a spell at Oldham where it was our win bonus was based on the crowd. If there was over a certain number of people, we get more money. So, it's sort of, but if you look back, there is actually a video online of that season, I think. Is it 91? Not sure. But Brett Clark, John Cogger playing, and there's some great football in it. It's, entertainment. And obviously we sort of, I think we came back up that year, but we'd done the same thing a bit before that. We were unfortunate to get relegated and then went down, only lost a couple of games, won the league, won the Premiership as well, I think. But then, then when you do get into, and this is the same these days, I think, when you do get into the top division, you might lose some of your best players who've gone on to other clubs because they'd played well in the second division. You might you bring in a bunch of lads who, back in those days it was like had the Kiwis and Aussies, not necessarily from the NRL, but from the domestic competitions over there. But it was like starting again. And then you sort of have a bit of a bad start, and all of a sudden it's like coach is threatened with the sack, players are earning less money, it just deteriorates. And like I said, I'd be very surprised if Toulouse don't just pull out the whole competition in the next couple of years, even if they stay in now. I think that we might see the back of them, just saying, look, we'll go back to playing domestic, French domestic league,
Yeah. Well, that's fair. So maybe we'll move on to things a bit more positive.
Stop crying about
that. Two disappointing grand finals and the death knell of Toulouse. But all that aside, across the league for a little bit, and that's kind of why we're here. So Oldham Owls have won the Grand Prix, which is fantastic. They formed this year. They've had a great attitude towards the game itself. They've registered a whole bunch of players, and they've got their own hashtag Owls of Oldham, and they're doing really well.
Yeah, that's. I think they sort of showed it. It was really a new model to us because we'd sort of been focusing on clubs getting their cross league team together, and these lads are not just connected to one club, and they got themselves together, got themselves a kit, got to travel around the place and playing in different competitions. They seem to really enjoy it, and it's good to get sort of recognition by winning it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the trophy they got was probably a little bit small. I think what we need to sort of sort out a shield that we can engrave onto, but it was a little bit short notice to get something that day. So we're definitely going to get something a little bit bigger for the Grand Prix going forward. All in all, the Grand Prix it did its job. That's what we wanted it to do. We travelled around. We got different teams in different places, and we sort of had a cohesive competition. So and I think that it sort of bodes well for the future of the Grand Prix. It ran successfully, and we should be able to get more teams and perhaps more dates in next year.
Yeah, and then have that sort of more dates, and that we're not too fussed that people don't get to every one, because there's more dates, and like if there's 10 Grand Prix events and you get to 4 or 5, you might finish up still winning it, depending on how you went on the day, sort of thing. So if we were having that big geographical spread, then that might well happen. Right? The people can't get to every event.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a good idea though. It was good for us because it did get people do a bit of travelling, have that bit of banter and camaraderie, and it serves the purpose of creating the team atmosphere.
Yeah, and then on the same weekend, obviously we had the competition in York. In Am I saying that right?
I think it's Eworth. Yeah, I think it's Eworth. I'm not sure.
Eworth. I mean, Paul McDermott did a fantastic job for us there, and I think there's a sort of that was a bit of a proving ground, really, that you can take the game to anyone, they can enjoy it, and they can win at it. And also, I think on the day, the 2 Warrington teams had been playing regularly, playing against a Heworth team, or maybe a couple of them, and Heworth ended up winning. Because it's not like, compared to, say, some variants where there's a lot of like specific skills.
Are you going to mention our trip to Galway?
And well, just here in the TRL, which is very similar to Rugby League and prides itself on being as close to Rugby League as possible, still has a bit of an issue around that there's no marker, which creates a sort of a situation around the ruck which is not the same as you would expect in a game of Rugby League. I think that the thing sort of proves that if you're good at Rugby League, you'll win a cross league.
That's it,
like I wouldn't expect a team who's been playing cross league for 10 years and have loads of experience to beat Australia, but maybe a team who've been playing tag for 10 years or touch for 10 years, and a FIT touch, which is like quite specific. Maybe they would beat the Kangaroos at tag.
Yeah, and obviously that's good for us, because I think it shows that, doesn't it, that we've said it. We don't say it enough, but I think we have said it a few times. If you're good at Rugby League, you'll be good at cross league. So, that's what we want people to do. We want, it's as we've said before, it's sort of a training game initially. It's just something that you can play at training that saves people getting smashed. And in these days of collisions and people getting knocked out and all that sort of thing, you need a safe training game, really. Obviously everybody has to learn. People, if you're going to play the full game, you have to learn to tackle, and you have to get used to the contact in tackles. But when you can know that technique and just not have to use it every day in training, obviously everybody needs to do some practice of it, but it's there's, I think, some, like rugby union is sort of placing limits on how much contact time the professional players have, just so that they don't keep adding to their concussions in training.
And I suppose there's no limit to how much cross league you can play, which is sort of that kind of like sets it apart, really. It's so close to executing those skills, but it's safe and can be unlimited. So maybe that is that people will end up going down.
I think the other thing about it is because it's on a small pitch, it's a sort of like it's an attacking set every time. So you have to be defending against an attacking set. So you don't have this sort of arm wrestle stuff. So you can get your players on and you can get well organised and run your sort of attacking players without having to waste time doing all the sort of hard yards and the arm wrestle and all that.
Yeah, I think that the arm wrestle and the hard yards there's no real variant that sort of covers that. Like maybe Masters does when people are playing full contact, but it doesn't seem to be that's the spirit of Masters. It is more about throwing the ball around. There isn't really a variant that's going to be where you're going to win the ground as a kind of a like part of that game. I mean, the closest you'll get to that is judo, which isn't a variant. But I think that's probably one drawback for some coaches who are really into the arm wrestle, which there unfortunately are lots of them.
Yeah. Well, I did read one coach talking about the Salford. No, sorry. Oh yeah, it was the Lee against York, and like Lee had beaten by like. Did they get to 100 points? They absolutely annihilated them a few weeks before. But they, their head coach was saying, "There's no point us just trying to play your standard rugby league against them because we know what'll happen. They'll destroy us." Now, the thing is, they still did get destroyed, but at least they went in with an attitude of, "What we're not going to win this game by completing more sets, by making a couple more yards and getting a longer kick and getting a slightly better chase." Those things actually don't win you games. And I prefer if other coaches realise that, because I suppose it's a strong word, abomination.
It is.
It absolutely destroys the idea of rugby league. It was never meant to be like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it should really be about passing and running and who's the best at that. And if that isn't actually true, is it right now? Like the sort of the role of the coach has been expanded. The sort of the usage of like utilities over skillful players is massively expanded at all levels. Even at amateur level, you're going to pick the guy who'll do what you say over somebody who has their own ideas, and that's unfortunately the game's gone. But I do think that a lot of that started with the introduction of 10 meters onside, because it meant that you could then take the space that's in front of you rather than trying to create the space in behind the defensive line. And that's
true.
Like we sort of. I dread to think what would happen if you took the modern game and then made it 5 meters onside. It'd be like a series. It's probably because of the way the game's gone. But I don't know. It's an unintended consequence. I think is probably the best way. This idea was, you guys go back further. We'll throw it around a bit, and that's how it's working.
It was time and space,
but then not at all. What happened was teams decided to start their drives from right on the attacking line to try and take that sort of guaranteed 60 meters or whatever it is, Well, really, because I mean, a guaranteed 60 meters is obviously there's a little bit of a exaggeration there. You're not going to take that space every single time, but if you look at the flip side of that, it's what would you be given with 5 meters? 30.
Yeah, half of it. Yeah. So if you're only
30 meter set, it's not good. Like you couldn't.
No, if you think at the sort of 10 meter separation, teams are only getting 30 meters per set. So if you're on 5 meters a tackle, then they'd only be getting 15.
Yeah, which is that's no yardage really.
No,
but that's something that maybe one day they'll go to 5 tackles instead of 6, or make people play a little bit. Maybe they'll go back to 4 tackles like in the 70s.
I really don't think 4 is enough, but I do think 6 may be too many. So yeah, maybe 5. We should have settled on 5. I don't know why we didn't ever give 5 a chance.
Yeah, all we are saying is give 5 a chance.
Yes. Yeah.
Hashtag that. All right, so just moving on. Just
try.
Say that again.
It's funny that they didn't try it, that they just jumped straight to 6.
I think that maybe 6 plays into the sort of cricket. I'm not quite sure what 4 was. American football, maybe. I'm not sure. 4 downs. And then 6 balls in and over. Maybe that was they were just trying to fit in. But but back then when they made that decision, they didn't give you 10 meters onside. So very hard to blame them when it was 6 with 5 meters, and now it's 6, sometimes 7 with 10 meters. They weren't playing with the same deck of cards, really. So,
no.
Anyway, moving on. Just want to talk about some of the specific skills in cross league. And I think one of the ones that's been highlighted here is the transition of the ball from a 2-hand carry to maybe a 1-hand carry with the ball further away. Something that comes up in coaching courses a lot is to carry the ball in 2 hands, but that's not actually as widespread practically as some coaches would make out.
Yeah, I think personally that people say, "Oh, carry the ball in 2 hands," and they've missed the point a little bit. It was when they played with a bigger football, and people tucked it under their arm when they were going to take people on and they were going to go into contact. The guy that carried the ball in 2 hands, the halfback, he was carrying it in 2 hands because he was going to pass. Or because he wanted you to think he was going to pass. And that's the thing. That's where it came from originally. Now, when you've got a Steeden ball or whoever manufactures other rugby league balls, that you probably can hold in 1 hand and still get a flick pass out the back door. There's that sort of... I mean, obviously, if you think of the Gidley flick, he exploited the sort of idea that when people saw that he had it in 1 hand, they thought, he's going to be taking it in.
Yeah.
He's given up.
Yeah.
And then he started beating people who used to Manatahu. Is that who he used to give it to?
That's right.
A load of traffic down that right wing.
I think the other thing, a lot of ball players use their chest and 1 hand, even now.
Yeah.
One refers to that as the 3rd hand somewhere else. Is that right?
Yeah. I've heard that used. Yeah. I think the thing about that is if you've got a good grip in 1 hand and you can bring it to the position where you're going to pass, then you don't need to be carrying it in 2 hands. 2 hands actually slows you down as well.
Of course,
because you've got no arm action. If you ask Usain Bolt or people since Usain Bolt to try and run 100 meters carrying a rugby ball in 2 hands and see how far they lose by. Because
the thing is, if it was faster to run into with your ball in 2 hands or with your hands stationary around the chest height, all sprinters would do that, wouldn't they? But they don't. They have massive arm actions.
Yeah, and there's a reason for that though. Some of that is sort of striding that's overstriding and not applicable to running on a
understandable. I suppose I've exaggerated the point a little bit there. But I know what you mean. That that kind of running has no league either. Like full out sprinting, trying to cover a huge amount on stride. Makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I was talking to Chris Coates, and he was sort of, the England cross league coach, and he was sort of suggesting that was one of the skills that he was looking to when he's picking a team who has that skill that they're transitioning the ball across. Cross league, the rules lend themselves to this skill is a big part of it. What you're doing with the ball, keeping it away from people, keeping a guard on it, keeping it under control when you transition, and then of course being able to actually pass as well. There's a lot to it, and I think it's definitely something we should make more of.
Yeah, it's not something that I was ever very good at. I have to admit that. Pretty small hands, and played at a time when the ball was a little bit bigger, so I had to sort of look after it, and I tended to just tuck it in my right hand, never swap. But I'm in good company there, because if you ever watch Greg Inglis, it was it right hand carry, left hand fend? Didn't matter where he was on the field, he always did that. So yes, I think it's a great skill to have, being able to switch and fend. If you look at somebody like the old clips of Eric Groth, he was brilliant at that. But one of the best ever, never bothered with it, Greg Inglis.
Yeah, but do you think that maybe in that case, is it a skill for a certain position then? Because if you think, it's interesting you mentioned Eric Groth. I think with you particularly, and probably Inglis is taking that ball on one side and holding it on the outside, as opposed to in towards the defender.
But I've specifically sort of watched some clips of Inglis, and he, when he played fullback as well, he'd be sort of on the side of the field where you should be carrying in your left hand and fending with your right hand, and he just never did it.
That isn't that. So should we just change the rules then? What are you saying?
No, what I'm saying is that he didn't, he was as good as he was, and he was absolutely brilliant for a spell, wasn't he? Like the best in the world. Mm-hmm. You could have got some young coach or somebody that coached him when they were young that said, "Hey, Greg, look, you're never going to progress if you can't swap the ball over and carry it in your other hand." And he might have just been put off, and we never got to see him play. So,
do you not think he could he have been a better player if he did do that? I don't know any circumstances where that was something that was a detriment to him, but I suppose that's
I think one thing that he did do, he managed to be able to fend people on his right hand side with his left hand. Now we managed to, I suppose he was a tall guy, long arms, but he sort of developed that skill to compensate that he could still fend with the same hand, even across his body, and not getting so caught up in it. And I suppose he big stride and a big step and all that, didn't he? So
in a lot of ways, this has actually undone all of this podcast by existing. We've got stride, not changing hands. I think I saw him carry it in two hands one time as well. So
yeah, well, maybe it's just because I was so bad at it that I think, oh well, if I was bad at it, well, Greg Inglis was bad at it and he did okay. So, but I do think it is, if you can get a player to be conscious of being able to do that, swap hands, poke through the line, get the sort of backhanded offload. Like we have a guy, don't we, Dave Reen, who sort of manages to do that. Push through the line, reach out, and do a backhanded flick.
I think an old style, loose forward would probably really benefit from that kind of. And there's some of them coming back, aren't there? They're not necessarily loose forward anymore, but they're people who play a little bit like that.
Ball playing forward,
where that they'd sort of maybe they're not going to make a clean break. And having the ball in the sort of hand that's poking through the line is, that's the skill that'll get the offload away, and then that offload will lead to tries and points and championships.
Yeah. I think as well, maybe these days, and this is one of the reasons for cross league, I suppose, the defenders are aiming at the ball more, aren't they? So you have to be a bit more careful with the ball. Back in the time when I was playing, a lot of defenders would have just made leg tackles. And if you could manage to just keep the ball up over the shoulder impact with you, then you had that little bit of a, split second to get a pass away.
Mm-hmm.
It's still quite common in rugby union that people make that tackle. It's not very common in rugby league. And players who are wanting to play rugby league and are using cross league as that sort of stepping stone into the full game are probably better playing cross league because of that. The step up from tag, obviously tag is below the ball to pull off the tags. But cross league, the defenders are aiming up for the place that they aim up for when they tackle you in a full contact game. So it's a good skill to have if you're going to progress into the full game.
Yeah.
Or just practice with the full game if you're already in it.
Yeah. I think that I haven't finalized it yet, but there is going to be. I'm trying to work on a Latin phrase that's sort of practice makes perfect type of thing, and I'm hoping to put that on the World Cup trophy, because I think the ethos of cross league is that it's good practice.
Well, the sort of sports sciencey type thing is that it's not just practice that makes perfect; it's perfect practice that makes perfect.
Yeah,
I would have a little bit of a problem with that in that people find ways of doing things that are not perfect. Effectiveness is what matters.
Right.
If you might not be throwing the perfect spiral or the perfect pass over distance or whatever, but if it's getting there and you've drawn your defenders and you put your runner into space, who's to criticise that pass? It might be unorthodox, but it works.
Full of that in the NFL. Joe Kapp in 1969, I think he threw 6 touchdown passes, which was a record at the time. It might have lasted for a long time. Was it 6 or 7? I'm not sure. But he never used the laces when he was throwing.
Yeah, just any old grabbing it. Yeah.
So they sort of, if you can look this up very easily on YouTube, is that they would sort of wobble in the air, like not at all. But breaking records with that same. So, maybe effective practice that makes perfect and not perfect practice.
And discovering that you're not so perfect practice gets the job done. It's a very long Latin phrase you're going to put up.
We've been batting it around for a little bit. It's hard to get something that actually makes sense. But I don't think there'll be a lot of people. I don't know if the cross league community is very up on their Latin. So I think we might.
We might have to change it.
I'll say it says practice makes perfect, but I don't know that. Like, I have worked on the phrase quite a bit. We're still early stages. We haven't quite finalized it yet. So just speaking of that, World Cup coming up.
Yeah. Our World Cup.
Yeah.
As well as everybody else's World Cup. Yeah.
Our World Cup. So just I suppose just to explain to people listening in, so that we have international test teams on the Friday afternoon on the 11th of November, and then a regional heritage competition on Saturday the 12th, which should include maybe 3 Lancashire teams, 2 Cheshire teams, 3 Yorkshire teams, I think a team from Oxfordshire and Surrey, so sort of county teams, and possibly an Irish team and some Scottish teams as well. So it's sort of a bit of a festival of World Cups, festival inside a World Cup. It's sort of spreading this sort of awareness across the league by allowing people to play at that sort of rep level.
Yeah. Oh, it should be great. And obviously, we did have a run through really of it, because we played last year when the original Rugby League World Cup was supposed to be on. We still went ahead with our event, and yeah, it was great. It was successful, and everybody enjoyed it. And hopefully, people have learnt the game a little bit more, because there's been a whole year of people playing more cross league. We've put together a referees coaching course, a referee course. And as I said, more people have got more experience, so hopefully it'll be even better this time, and people will be playing some quality stuff.
Mm-hmm. And we'll probably do a sort of a little podcasty type thing from the event when we get there, maybe even a little bit in the build-up, because I'm going up there the week before. But yeah, it does promise to be something special. Hopefully we get a good bit of weather. It's not.
Yeah, rugby league, very weather. It's very dependent on the weather, isn't it? You know, that rain being a great leveler, it's a great destroyer, really, of quality.
At least we have an artificial pitch. I think will help.
Yeah, that's a massive difference, though. The fact that we're on an artificial pitch, it makes it much more. You can still keep trying stuff. Yeah, the ball might get a little bit wet, but it's not like you're getting covered in mud and sliding and all that.
Yeah, I think that's one thing. Like the TRL here have had a few rep competitions, very similar scale to what we have, maybe slightly bigger. But they've played on council pitches that are grass, and unfortunately, times the Queensland weather can be very cruel. That it will like rain really heavy for, you know, either just a morning or sometimes like I think they've had one where it was drenched the whole time. But what tends to happen then is the pitch cuts up very badly, and your sort of what should be your showcase games, the sort of semi-finals and final, mud baths, and like mud bath touch. Nobody's interested in that. The ball doesn't. It should. It's very hard to get away from people anyway at touch because of the range a defender has. They've got from one fingertip to the other, which is a hell of a distance compared to, say, you know, tag and cross league, where you're like your target area is just the ball. I mean, that the ball is not that width.
No.
Like, yeah, it can get very. I suppose they depend on kicks more there when that happens. But it's not a great look, and it doesn't look like people are enjoying it as much. But it would be nice to be on a consistent surface for the full weekend, which is luckily what we've got. And I think, you know, you can play across league on an artificial pitch, and there are artificial pitches around these days. Is a sort of another help in spreading the game.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's like you say, that sort of consistency and being able to play it like in all weathers and what have you. I think sometimes they call those pitches all weather pitches, don't they?
Actually, yeah, that is a term I've heard used.
Yes.
I think when I was, you know, first introduced to like a 4G pitch or a 3G pitch, I think it was, I was very hesitant, like most people, because the only sort of artificial pitches I'd seen up to then is that really hard hockey pitch type of thing with the no, and those things are absolutely deadly. But you know, for scrapes, and then obviously it's a very hard impact when you land on them. But I think these days, you know, and apparently they're getting even better with their things that we've learned over the last year, is that there are shock pads that are on some of these. Which makes it, again, even better. But like the thing about it is the pitches that we were to play on in Ireland in the winter would be heavy with rain, and in the summer would be rock hard with sort of drought. So, like, at least an all-weather pitch would be consistent in the full year.
Yeah, when we played down in Fossa, that's been one of the good things about it. That it's always, the pitch has always been in good shape.
Yeah. So we're coming up to the end of the sort of show, if you will, and I just thought I'd ask a little question about rugby league anthems. Now, obviously, with the World Cup coming up, you sort of think of football's coming home, don't you? The soccer anthem. But has there ever been a rugby league anthem that's been in the charts?
I don't think so.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You would think that here you would get something in Australia because
Australia would, yeah. I mean, they did have that one that was played a lot, but that talks about the scrum still being.
Oh yeah, I think that's called the Rugby League song. I think his name is it McMaster? Is that his last name?
I'm not sure. Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you now. Danny McMaster.
Right.
League song from 1981.
Yeah.
Whether you're on the cricket ground, Lang Park, or the Bush, that's the sort of start of that. But interestingly enough, I have it's not Siri. What's the other one called?
Alexa.
So that's right. She's listening in now. But I go to try and play the Rugby League song, and there's an actual song on Spotify. Rugby League is crap. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
No, I haven't.
She plays that every single time I ask. And I think it's from a sort of an AFL point of view, I think, and it talks about crowd sizes. To be honest with you, I think the guy's got a point. I'm not sure he had a point when he wrote it, but he certainly does now. Crowd sizes are rubbish and it's not entertaining, and that's why people like the AFL instead.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's what happens if you say play the Rugby League song, that comes on. That's a little bit much, isn't it?
Yeah, badly. Bad AI. She needs educating.
Yeah, I had to actually learn that he was called Danny McMaster in order to get it played.
Right. Danny McMaster's Rugby League song.
Yeah,
does that work?
That's the way to do it. But I think I saw on Facebook someone did release some sort of single, did they?
I don't know. Oh yes, yeah. I didn't hear it actually, but hasn't Craig Alstead got something to do with it?
Yeah, right.
Alstead's son was the Oldham journalist for donkey's years. Yeah.
That I mean, is this got any legs? Are we expected to?
I think is it being promoted by Rugby League Cares? They usually get a
State of Mind. One voice, one song. We Are United charity song released. State of Mind. Sport.org. Yeah, I hope that I haven't heard it, and I actually wrote the notes for this show before I'd heard about this. So when we sort of got to the anthem, I just remembered that I'd seen that this morning.
Right. Yeah.
Well, we'll definitely link it.
Just on anthems, and this might be a little bit controversial, but I think New Zealand get too much of an advantage, and the Pacific Islanders by doing their hackers. So there's one controversial point because it's a real G up in it for the lads doing it. It really sort of gets them ready for them. But also, one thing that I don't like is that when people start saying, "Oh yeah, we'll have highlights of the game," they don't bother showing the game and they just show people doing the hacker, which I think is, it's not a cultural event; it's an actual game of rugby league. So editors take that into account.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Like you feel like you're being disrespectful by saying that, but like. I
mean, I think it is a great sort of cultural thing. I like it, but I just don't like how it sort of. For one thing, it gives them an advantage, I think, because you couldn't try to sort of replicate that as an Irish team or an English team or a French team. Well, like you know, it's just not part of the culture. So it'd be forced if you had some sort of fellas with spears and.
I dread to think what an Irish English
Exactly. Yes, I know. I would. Yeah.
Like. What about like them doing it after the game? Is that just not a thing? Like, because then at least then they haven't had that sort of two anthem build up and then they're firing off.
But it is. It's a challenge, though, isn't it? That's the thing about it. It's like it's a pre-game challenge rather than a post-game celebration, I suppose. I don't, and then who's going to do it when they've lost? And
that's true.
I don't know. I mean, sometimes they do that, don't they? Like, there's somebody in the crowd, or if it's somebody's last game, might get a bunch of people doing it. And that, I'm absolutely happy with that. I just wish it was a bit of a level playing field for that everybody had that sort of opportunity, and they don't. But also, I just did the editing of it. When you're putting clips together, and you don't bother showing the sort of who created the gap for the try.
I think when it comes to highlights and coverage, you and me probably have a slightly different opinion than most people. Like, I think want to see. This year's grand final? They filmed a lot from the back, which I think is just, why can't they just do that time?
I know. God, it's like the mobile camera that's above it, wasn't it? Like, I think a lot of grounds are limited because it's that wired camera, isn't it, that runs above them. And it's so much better. You can see guys like creating a gap with a step. You can see him not creating a gap and getting hammered because they didn't bother to try to make a bit of space for themselves. And it's just that people talk about, players go inside, you've got to go forwards first. You can't. And in general, if you're trying to build a good set that sort of makes space and asks questions, yes, you do have to have a bit of go forward as well as going sideways. But if you watch players actually running from that sort of camera angle where the camera's behind them, none of them are just running straight. Everybody has that, like, a little bit of a lean here, a little bit of a lean there, see what the defender does. Is he set? Can I step away from him with my next step? And you just get a much better picture of what straight looks like. It's not running straight,
Yeah, I think it's just and also you would get to see people calling plays off the ball more. Like, that would be the highlight I'd like to see. Someone calling a play and then running and it being successful. Like, it's with the way we cover Rugby League. And we zoom into every tackle. It's almost as if
that is the worst thing. That is just destroyed
to the great players who are organising and orchestrating some fantastic football. To the viewer, and particularly to the uneducated viewer, it seems like these tries happen either by accident, or they were just a guy ran over a guy, or there was a missed tackle. So they it's a mistake by someone else. They don't see the orchestration, and really that's something that somebody needs to sort out because it's been going on for too long. I think when they didn't have as many cameras, the game was covered a bit better because there was a broader picture.
Done from a distance,
yeah. Anyway, we're coming up to just a minute to go, so I think we'll leave it there. So
leave it there. No.